Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We're brought to you by Pelican, built tough for all situations. Go to pelican.com. Yak Gadget, for all your fine kayak fishing accessory needs. Go to yakgadget.com. Eastport Marina, on the beautiful shores of Dale Hollow Lake. For all your lodging, kayaking, and fishing needs, go to eastport.info. Now let's get this show started.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Reel Down. I'm your host, Jimmy Skinner, coming at you from Dale Hollow Lake, Eastport Marina. Me and Brian made it down here a little earlier than everybody. We got these kick-ass cabins out here in the middle of nowhere, which is fantastic. Brian's in the back dancing a little jig. I wish y'all could see it. I don't know. You kind of probably don't want to see that, but yeah, we're down here. We're getting ready for our event. We've got a joint event with the Central Tennessee Kayak Anglers and the Cumberland Kayak Trail 2-day event down here. So if you haven't signed up, you're going to be in the area, or maybe you're not in the area, but it's a close drive and you got nothing else to do this coming up weekend. Come on down, catch some smallies, see if you can cash a check. But that's not what the show is about tonight. Tonight, this morning, whenever you listen to this, what this show is we're covering the winners from the Hobie Bos Santee Cooper. So without further ado, I would say in no respective order, but they actually lined up perfectly in the background. Your winner, Nate Conley. Second place, Russ Snyders. Third place, Cody Milton. What's going on, guys? How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Good.
Doing well.
Cody's doing so good that he just kept fishing and about forgot about the show, but we'll forgive him this time.
The last hour really heated up. It was good.
What part of the country are you in right now?
I'm down in Shreveport fishing the Caddo Lake tournament for a KBF.
Oh, okay. I bet it is fired up down there right now.
It was like the water temperature was like 70, 72 degrees when I got off the water. They were pretty good.
I'm hearing water's like 53 up here right now, so that's kind of depressing. What about you, Russ? You get back home okay?
Yeah, I got back home. Got in yesterday and just been unpacking and getting things, just getting settled in and getting. I guess got a few weeks until my next tournament at Eufaula, so I'm gonna try to just take care of some stuff here while I can.
No, that's great, man. It's probably much needed. I know the season kind of just kicked off for some people, but those back-to-back grinders like Cody's doing have got to be just, there's stuff that at home that needs to be done that will not get done if you're not there doing it. So I understand.
Yeah.
What about you, Nate? Out of everybody, you had probably the crappiest distance-wise drive. Old Mr. Canada over here it's a happy drive. You're going back in a great mood, but it probably still sucked.
Yeah, I actually came home to a snowstorm and completely iced over roads.
Wow.
So that was fun. Yeah, it was a 16-hour drive, and ended up making it home last night at midnight. And
Jeez.
Been so busy with work, and I just got my car unpacked about an hour ago. So we're getting settled in.
That's nuts. Well, like I said in the very beginning of this, this is covering the Hobie Bos on Santee Cooper. I want to get Russ, tell us a little bit about the lake, and then I want to get Nate's perspective of it coming from somebody outside of the country who, covered a hell of a distance to come fish this lake in particular. But give us a little breakdown, Russ.
Yeah, so Santee Cooper, it's basically cypress swamps is very similar to Caddo where Cody's at. It's my second time there. I went there for the KBF event a couple years ago, and it was a little earlier in the season. And this time for the Hobie tournament here, we hit it right after a full moon where there was a big spawn. And to be honest, the weekend before was that Bassmaster tournament, and they really got it just right. There was a couple of those anglers hit the century mark, and we after that tournament we got there, so I got beat up a little bit by the Elite Series anglers, but it's such a popular lake that it gets beat up just about every weekend with tournaments. But it's good pre-fishing throughout the week for a lot of guys, but we did have some dropping water, and some serious wind and some pretty unseasonable cold weather too. So that definitely affected the bite, made it a little tougher, but there was still, I mean, it was pretty impressive how many fish were over 20 inches were caught
Oh
up.
yeah, there was something I was going to get to. Is there was a ridiculous amount of good fish caught, and then there was also a tournament in conjunction with the Hobie that was the Queen City Kayak Anglers, I think's who it was, that Eric Siddiqui won, and there were a ton of huge fish caught in that tournament. There was just a lot more falling off as far as good limits went, but it's anybody that knows anything about Santee Cooper, whether you've been or not, knows that it historically is a big fish producer. So going from that, like Nate, coming from Canada, why did you pick this one? And what was your, not tournament details, but give us your rundown of the lake, what you saw, like what kind of lake it is, etc.
Yeah, I was I knew that the elites were coming there like a while ago, so I started researching the lake, and I do a lot of YouTube research. So I was watching all the videos from, I think it was the 2006. It was like multiple 30-pound bags, and I just wanted to come down and catch some monsters. Like my whole goal was, I wasn't thinking like I want to win this thing. I want to be competitive, and I just wanted to try to catch some giants. I know there's, they're catching double digits out there. Sometimes 8s are pretty common, like every week. So a lot of big fish, and that's actually what brought me down.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just first thing I thought of when I saw, the results was, obviously it's a great lake, but there's hundreds of Great Lakes in our country. What made that lake appeal, the most to come attack that one? So that obviously, big fish. Oh, look, the beer fairy. Thank you, fairy. But what about you, Cody? Is there anything you can add to that these guys haven't said? Any definition or explanation to the lake that you can add?
Man, the one thing that was kind of unique is I've been to Santee. This is probably my 4th trip there. Is they were definitely kind of on cypress trees this week, but that's not typically where, they're not always on cypress trees, on Santee. Like, like Caddo and stuff, like they're always on cypress trees and stuff for the most part. But I found that to be like probably the most unique thing that I'd seen, from the past times of being there was they were definitely, spawning on some of those trees. I know, all the fish weren't spawning on them, but definitely a pretty good portion of them were.
Heck yeah. It sounds like every time I choose to skip out on these events, and it's nothing against, Hobie or anything, or, I prefer to run a motor. That's probably the only thing that keeps me out of them. But for the most part, it seems like a lot of these events are timed well, and as excited I am to hear about you guys doing so great, and like, damn, I wish I'd been there, because it's, spawning on trees and the cypress swamp. That's my kind of thing. But there's a great explanation. So let's go right off of that and talk about pre-fishing. Cody, we'll start with you. Did you get to have some time on the water, or did you come in late and just kind of get on them, or how'd that go?
Oh, you say that one more time?
Yeah, no problem. I was fixing to say, no, you're good. Going right into pre-fishing, tell us, did you get some time to pre-fish? Did you just fish history and show up kind of late? What was your game plan going in? We might be losing Cody a little bit. Russ, go ahead and tell us about how your pre-fishing setup went, and I'm gonna work on Cody a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time watching bass live. I think whenever there's a tournament, where there's a Bassmaster tournament right before ours, the smartest thing you can do is watch as much of that bass live or any kind of live coverage as possible, and just get an idea. It'll really, give you an idea of what's going on in that lake.
Oh, for sure.
And you could tell there was a major spawn going on, and the large majority of the competitors were sight fishing, and a large majority of the competitors were actually grouped up on one section really of Lake Marion. And Santee Cooper Lakes, is Lake Marion and Lake Moultrie. And both can come into play. But it seemed like the large majority were on Lake Marion and fishing a lot of those northern creeks that had clear water, and they were sight fishing them. So there was a big storm, and listening to the Bass Live, they were saying that guys were getting them upriver more during pre-fish, but they had a big storm that came through a couple days before and really blew out a lot of that northern area there, upriver, or I guess western. Yeah, I guess western area, which would be upriver more. So taking that, into account, when I got there, I figure I'd do a little bit of both. I was really hoping to fish some of that area that hadn't been beat up, and that muddy water that got washed out. Because I knew that anybody else, any other bass boat tournaments or any other, especially a lot of the other kayak competitors that were watching, I figured most people were going to spend a lot of time on those northern creeks with the clear water. And I really wanted to try to stay away from that, stay away from sight fishing. Because another thing is, I looked at our forecasts and saw that the temperatures were going to drop drastically, and it was going to be 30-mile-an-hour winds with like gusts to 40 on Saturday. So I'm like, all right. So from the start, when I got there Monday night, starting Tuesday, I really focused on areas that were going to be protected from that west wind, and areas that had dirty water, hoping I was going to get a bunch of fish that were the fresh fish that were moving up as that water was starting to stabilize. And Tuesday was a little tough, but then starting Wednesday, I figured out a good pattern. My buddy and roommate lives with me, Adam Reiser. He had a good day Tuesday, and because of him, he kind of pointed me in the right direction too. He said he was getting fish on reaction baits, fishing cypress trees in that dirtier water, and I'm like, that's exactly what I want to be doing as well. So Wednesday, I found some good fish. I probably had 50 bites or so. And I was just trying to keep it really quiet. I wasn't talking to a lot of people. Just Adam and Cody were the only people I really talked to. And shook off as many as I could, but it's hard to shake them off too. Cause they're really aggressive, and they'd run like crazy, and you try to, leave it in their mouth too long, they start getting wrapped around the cypress trees and stuff. So I hooked more than I really would have liked to, but yeah, and then Thursday I found another similar area, and I knew Adam's area was pretty similar. So I'm like, all right, this is definitely a pattern that's happening all over the lake there. And then Friday I was talking to Cody, and on Friday I'm like, hey man, let's go check out this other area. I already knew where I wanted to fish. Adam knew where he wanted to fish. So me and Cody explored an area and found some good fish as well. So I think all three of us were doing a similar pattern, but just on we had our own maybe a large area to ourselves,
Which considering how many people are in an event, and you tend to see a lot of like grouping up sometimes, having that confidence that you've got a pattern, you've basically got your own water.
I only shared it with one. There's only one kayak angler that I shared water with the whole time.
And you can deal with one. Sometimes you can deal with two. It's when it's five, or you pull up to the ramp like I did at Logan Martin, and there's 33 people at your ramp, and you're just like, well, never mind. What about you, Nate? How did pre-fishing go for you? Did you have any previous experience? Have you ever made the drive down to Santee before, or was this just I'm just going for it?
Yeah, no, I was just going for it. It was the first time I was on the lake. I did a lot of lake research before I got down there. A lot on Google Maps and looking at Navionics and sea mapping and stuff like that. But it was quite similar to what Russ was saying. Like, I was watching the elites. I kind of figured everyone would be, rushing into Potato Creek or completely avoiding it. So I did end up fishing a lot of the northern creeks. That's kind of where I started, because I was looking for clean water. It was a little different than Russ. You're maybe power fishing, and I fish a little more, finesse, and I slow down quite a bit. Really pick my spots apart. So I wasn't catching anything on moving baits in pre-fish. But I did check a lot of the northern creeks, and then I went down to the southern end of Marion and checked out a bunch of pockets down there. I only got like 2 bites a day, but if I did get 2 bites, I kind of left the area and said, okay, there's fish here. I'm gonna stay. But I did get a couple giant bites on the south end, like probably the biggest fish, and I didn't land it. I pitched to a cypress tree, just got hammered. He's pulling drag. He goes to jump, and I pin him down. Then he flies the other way, about to jump. I pin him down. Then he goes directly across from the boat, about 15 feet out, and goes to jump. And he's like, it's like reminded me of like a whale coming out of the water. You know, those humpback whales that can't really get to the water, and they just kind of fall over to the side.
Yeah.
That's what it was like, and it was huge. I felt like it was like a ruler wide. It was insane, and he like spit the hook straight up in the air when he did that little jump, if you can call it that. But so I kind of kept that spot too if my northern creeks didn't work out. And I pre-fished from Tuesday to Friday, and I was a little concerned going into the tournament because it was nothing like Russ. There was no 50 bites. It was a couple a day, and our whole household was like that too. It was a couple bites a day. Shook a few off, but I wasn't terribly excited going into day one that I was going to just
keep. Yeah. Well, it's always. I mean, and this is bass fishing in particular, and it could be just because I'm biased, but I feel like it's more so with kayak fishing that I personally see that so many tournaments, if you go through the top, especially, first and second, it's very, very rare that they're running like into the same situation, moving bait bite, shallow bite, deep bite. There's just so much diversity, and it's great because it shows just how many things come into play and how many possibilities that there can be. What about you, Cody? We know that you and Russ and everybody, or you, Russ, and Adam kind of, have talked and stuff like that. So similar bite that you had going on, or similar bite that Russ had going on.
Yeah, it was pretty similar. It kind of my first few days of practice, I actually kind of stayed more on the main lake. And I guess was kind of crossing my fingers that wind wasn't real that they were forecasting. Because I was loving fishing those deeper cypress trees, like out on the main lake.
Right.
Had an epic day the first day I was there. Got like a 23 something, like probably lost another 23 something, and then like the next day kind of went back to kind of did the same thing in a different area and like lost probably one that was like, personal best. Like it was a big one, but I wouldn't get a ton of bites doing it. I really felt like that wind. I felt like if they missed that wind a little bit and it was really only like 20 to 25, like I really thought it was going to go off on the main lake still, kind of like you saw on, Sunday. Right. That wind was still howling. It was probably only 20 or so, but those big bags came out of the main lake for the most part. And I mean, I do think that those were probably next wave fish. Yeah, I'm pretty convinced. Like when you were really getting way up in those trees and kind of got in that 2-3 foot of water, I didn't think they were spawners at first, but especially on Sunday, really convinced me that they were spawning fish. Like. I missed a few bites the first day, even like broke a fish off the first day and went back, made one cast, caught it on Sunday. So that was pretty cool.
That this time of year, that's one of those like telltales that like, oh yeah, you're spawning.
It's surprising though, because that water temp was still in the high 50s.
It was.
Yeah. And they were still spawning. Yep. Usually, you want that magic number to be like 62, 63, but it was like 58, 59 degrees and they were still spawning in it.
So that's something that I wanted to hit on real quick is, for you guys that are, been fishing a long time, got a lot of experience with this. Everybody knows that the photo period and water temperature come into play in this time of year with the spawn. But with the crazy weather that we've had, and it seems like for some areas, the colder weather's kind of lasted just a little bit longer and our water temps have stayed down. Do you think that that's making those a little bit lower water temps like not as much as a factor as they're like, okay, I am ready to come up and get this deal done and get this spawn over with. Well, what do y'all think?
Man, I've had a theory, I kind of believe like when you're in a tropical climate, like a Florida, a South Carolina, probably even kind of like a South Louisiana, I feel like it's more based on the moon on those places. I know that
Right.
this really didn't completely say that because I know like you kind of get in, Middle Tennessee, Arkansas, kind of in the Midwest, like, when the water's right, they'll kind of go at any time. But it seems like when you're in those areas when the water's right for a long time, it is more based on the moon than anything.
Right.
Yeah, because there was warm water early, like much earlier, like a month before, and you always see it like around here. It still hasn't even hit 63 yet. So sometimes it hits 63 or low 60s, and you're expecting them to be there, and they're not. We're like, what, the water temperature is there? Like, why aren't they there yet? But sometimes it takes like that second wave of it needs to be stable or that water temperature for a couple of weeks before they really decide to move up a lot of times.
I can say personally in the South, I don't think that we've seen that yet. I think we're like way later than what I've experienced in the last few years because, we did have like 3 days in the 80s and water temps were, I saw, mid 60s, but as soon as you got there, then the temperature fell out. We had snow.
Yeah.
Like, it went just as fast as it came. You got any thoughts on that, Nate?
Yeah, I'm not sure if my gauge was right, but I was reading like 60 and a half to like 61 and a half in my creek. So I'm not sure if that
it was warmer that part of the lake than for sure.
Yeah, especially if you were up there in the northern, maybe a little bit cleaner water, which that's an argument too, that muddy water warms up faster than clear water. It just depends on depth, blah, 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 blah. We won't get into all that. Check out Bass Universe for that kind of information. But
actually, Jimmy, to touch on that point about why it came down too, is actually in Ontario, we have conservation here, so we actually can't we can't fish during the spawn. So that was actually another reason why I wanted to come down. I knew that the fish would be spawning and it was going to be something new and unique. And
I actually did know that. I don't know if you're part of it. Me and Dan Perry, we had one of the Ontario kayak clubs on, I think this time last year, and he actually enlightened us to that because y'all had a bunch of anglers showing up for tournaments. It had been later in the year then, but talking about y'all's open water time period, the not being able to fish in the spawn, really only having good bass fishing for, I think he said like 4 or 5 months or something like that. I can't remember. I'd have to go back to the episode. If anybody wants to check out on that do not realize that the Canadians bass fish, look that episode back up, and they've got a bunch of good fish up there too.
Oh yeah, they do. That's the Ontario Kayak Bass Trail. You're lucky speaking with John Dean.
Yeah,
he's the tournament director there. So that's what I fish. But yeah, our fishing season doesn't open until June 26th, or well, I should say the third Saturday in June. So
that's crazy. Cody, Russ, do you think you could wait that long to fish a tournament?
No, I would have done the same thing. I've been making that 16-hour drive, no doubt.
Yeah.
No,
all right.
Spawning too much.
That I used to have a different opinion about it. Not like I don't like people that fish for spawning fish, but I was always a summer guy. I love summer fishing, hot weather, that kind of stuff. And then a good buddy of mine finally took me out to a little local pond and taught me how the spawn worked and sight fishing and bed fishing. I've gotten some information from Russ when we were at Lake Fork and stuff like that. And like, that's my thing now. So I completely understand if conservation, and the fishery in Alabama finally stepped up and did anything and took that away from us, I'd probably move, which I'm already that close anyway. Tennessee's starting to call to me. I love Tennessee.
It's awesome. I love it here.
Well, let's get into the tournament, guys. Everybody knows Hobie 2-day event, so 200 anglers, another sold out event from Hobie. Not to go in the future too much, but some limits caught. But the first day it got kind of stingy with limits, but there were some good fish caught. So Cody, go into how your day one went.
It was actually, it started, I caught one on the very first cast, or like right at 7 o'clock. I caught like a 17 and a half.
That's a bad
So
omen.
it started good.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what Russ kept telling me. I was like, no, it's like, this is good. This is good. But now, in all reality, I did go probably an hour and a half with like 2 fish after that. It kind of moved. I kind of moved around. I probably was throwing the wrong baits as much as anything, but it really picked up probably around 9 o'clock. I kind of got into a little better area, probably as much as anything. Yeah, I mean they were kind of eating a thumper spinnerbait pretty good first thing in the morning, but after that for me, I was really having to like kind of burn like a double willow by the trees a little more so.
And
and that
you
just kind
fishing
of
the
kept
really
heating
dirty
up
water?
as the day went on. It was really pocket like the kind of the sloughs were really cleaner. They kind of had coontail in the middle of them, and they cleaned up a little bit. But like as you got like off of those sloughs, you would get into like some stain. I wouldn't call it super muddy. It was more so the first day. Even kind of found a mud line at the middle part of the second day, and they were kind of around that. Not probably as much as I would have thought they would have been. I think as much as anything is like I just kept exploring that first day. I don't know if it was necessarily good or bad, but I probably fished new water for probably half of the day every day. Because I mean everything looked the same, so it didn't really feel like you were giving up much time moving and continually doing what was working in other areas. And then kind of stumbled across something pretty good with like probably an hour left. I got like a 20 and a half and like an 18.75 or something. So it looked a little prettier than it really was the first day. I caught a lot of fish. They weren't. I really caught all my big ones in like the last hour and a half, so it kind of worked out well for me.
Yeah, and just going back to day one, you caught 20 and 3/4, a 20 and a half, and a 20 and a quarter. 3 great big fish, and you ended up at the end of the day with 97 and a quarter, which third place going into day 2, which is a great way to start a tournament, especially thinking back to the fact that it's been beat on by the pros and all the boat folks, and especially to think about too for a lot of people. They say you don't leave fish to find fish, and like you talking about exploring a lot of new water. And then another fact to that is something that you mentioned is with all the areas being similar, I 100% agree with you because you can kind of judge what you've found. And then, if you've done your studying or know that everything's very similar, you can just I don't think of that as leaving fish. You're just hitting multiple areas of similarity for the same results. That's awesome.
Another thing, it was like that first day, like you would go in air. I would kind of. They were really sucked up on top of that grass, and it was like it seemed like anytime I found like a new area, there would be like a fairly significant amount of fry around.
Heck yeah. Well, what about you, Russ? What did day one have in tell for you?
So day one, I went to the spot I pre-fished on Wednesday where it had like 50 bites or so. And the very first area, I first started on an area where I caught the biggest fish and only fished it for about 10 minutes, didn't get a bite. And I was a little just thrown off as far as because the fish would just be in different moods throughout the day. Sometimes you could fish fast with a spinner bait. Sometimes they wouldn't touch a spinner bait and you had to, throw a Senko or something slow, or I was using a swim jig or using that Berkeley gilly, and I'd swim it and just drop it down right on the tree and dead stick it. I had a couple giant ones, like 8-pounders pre-fishing on that. But yeah, so I fished the first 10 minutes in an area where I caught my biggest fish, couldn't get a bite, and I was a little thrown off as far as like what kind of mood they were in. So I decided to go to this little shallow water flat that was just a few hundred yards away, and I knew there was a bunch of small buck bass there from like 12 to 15 inches, and the trees were very isolated. It was like every single tree when I fished it in pre-fish would have a fish, but they were all small. But I figured I could at least go there and just kind of get an idea what kind of mood they were in. And so I did that. I tied on a fluke, and I'd get them on the fluke, but they weren't super aggressive. They, a lot of times I'd cast past the tree with several lures. I'd always cast past it, work it up to it, and then a lot of times let it stop. And then depending on how long it took them before they picked it up off the bottom, I can kind of tell how aggressive they were. But I got a limit really quick on a fluke, probably in about 30, 40 minutes. Lost a couple decent ones, maybe 16, 17 inches. And then after that, I kept working and decided to hit another area. It was a bigger, just kind of open pond with some cypress trees, similar to where I caught those little ones, but just a little larger, a little deeper water nearby. I knew that area I was catching a lot of like 18 to 19 inch fish out of that spot. And by the time I got there, I fished kind of my way there, and I didn't get a bite for maybe an hour. I was fishing more of the thick jungle trees, and I did punch one fish. I punched two. There was grass mats also, like hyacinth mats with like some sort of duckweed type of stuff. But I punched a couple, and I was really changing baits a lot and just trying to figure out, once I felt like I was on the right bait, then I'd just stick with it. But I still felt like punching wasn't the right thing. And then finally at 10 o'clock, the wind picked up a little bit, and I finally tied on that spinner bait, that thumper one, same one Cody was using. And it was insane how many I was getting. I caught 20 fish, I think, in 2 hours from 10 to noon. They were just absolutely crushing that spinner bait. And then it seemed like if you got it in front of one, it was gonna eat it. It was probably every 3 or 4 trees, and they were all like 17 to 19. And I got one over 20 and a quarter. That are like a foot of water too. But I think all my fish, I had 2 19 and a halves, 2 19 and a quarters, and 21 was my best 5. And then after that, though, I noticed the water was dropping fast, and also noticed that a lot of those areas were clearing up too, like quickly, like just from the morning to the afternoon. Like there was a big difference in the water clarity. The next few hours, I couldn't figure anything else out really. And I felt like I'd caught all my fish in those high percentage areas. And I felt like the rest of the spots, I couldn't get bit anymore. It was getting too clear. And I was really, really worried for that next day. So I ended up fishing. I can wait to go into that, I guess, but I ended up fishing somewhere else that next day.
So a quick question I have for you is, one, when you were, like you said, you were fishing off of the trees with the buck bass that you had seen before, and that, getting an idea of how are they doing. When you are fishing that way, do you immediately, like when you catch one of those bucks, do you use that in your mind to know that, okay, obviously the females may not be here yet, but maybe they're back 40 yards?
In that area, it was just a really, really shallow area.
Gotcha.
That wasn't close to like deep water access, and it was just a type of area that I very unlikely to have bigger fish move up in
like
that area.
Right in the area.
Yeah, there was bigger fish nearby, but on that particular area, it was just really, really shallow. And that's a good area. And sometimes first thing in the morning, like those are the easiest ones to catch, are those really, if there's fish on a really, really shallow area where they kind of are forced to stay there. I kind of rather fish that sometimes than like the deeper, like the first 10, 15 minutes I fished that deeper water, like the deep access, like the first place the fish would kind of stage or get to before they moved up into that area. And the fact I didn't get a bite there, just told me, like, I just thought, all right, let me go up and get my limit. And if there's fish up in the shallow area, I'm going to know like quick, because they were on just about every tree, and there was only maybe 20, 25 trees in this shallow.
Right. And the second question I had is with the wind, you mentioned that, y'all were going to have projected winds up, really high, 30s, 40s, and you picked areas protected from the wind, but your bite ended up dependent a little bit on the wind towards the end of the day with that, that thumper.
It did. Yeah. And I fished it like by the end of the day, like that area where I was really crushing them on a spinnerbait, that was also a really open area as well. And I knew that, I kind of had it in my head, okay, what's going to be the best time to hit each of these sections? Because I know if I wait too long and that wind's blowing 30, 40 mile an hour gusts, I'm not going to be able to fish that one open area. So I was really in my head that, all right, I want to fish this. I want to time it out. So right when that wind kicks up, that's going to be a good time to fish this area. And then once it gets really strong after that, I had areas that were really protected, like tucked away in like heavily forested areas.
So with that heavy wind, is it for people, because I've had this question asked to me recently by someone new coming to this, so I'll ask it to you. Does the bite die down in the heavier wind, or is it just to the fact that in the kayak it is harder to fish the heavy winded areas?
Both, I guess. But in this case, it actually got really warm. By 10 o'clock, it started warming up pretty quick. And I noticed always whenever I take my hoodie off, my Dakota Lithium hoodie here, once I take that off, like it always seems to be like that's when the fish turn on all of a sudden sometimes. And once that wind kicked up, it was still warm. But then at noon, I actually noticed a temperature drop of maybe 5-degree temperature drop. And I think the fish felt that as well.
Oh, definitely. It's something to say about you guys that are doing this so well, so consistently, that and things that y'all mention, the factors that y'all pay attention to that most of us regular guys miss. These slight temperature changes, pressure changes, moon phase, all of that stuff comes into play, which is what separates y'all, and y'all as in a lot of these higher level people that consistently do so well from the rest of us. But Nate, why don't you how did your pre-fishing your day one, how did that go? Still fishing up north a little bit?
Yeah. My plan was to go back to, so I pre-fished a northern creek arm twice, and both times got a couple bites. Like I caught a couple of 18s, a 19, and then a 23.25. So
not too shabby.
Different days, same times. Like my bite window was like between like 8:30 to 11 or so. Mm-hmm. So my strategy for day one, there was kind of an offshore community hole, not far from the ramp. So I went there right off the start because the wind hadn't really picked up yet. So I figure I'll try to get maybe a quick small limit, and then work on some bigger fish from there. And I started off there in the morning. I threw a chatterbait and a spinnerbait around the shallow areas around that deep pool, and quickly snagged both of them, lost them both. Then I started throwing crankbaits, through the deeper water, lost that, threw a drop shot, got that snagged, and I'm like, you know what, I'm out.
This sounds like one of my fishing trips. I love this.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on, but I'm like, this isn't how I'm going to start my day. So I packed it up and I went into my creek arm, and I basically started working right away for that 23.25 that I caught in pre-fish. And I think I got it on my like second or third fish, or actually a similar one. I think it was maybe 23. I'm not.
Yeah, 23.
Was it 23? Yeah. So I knew there was a couple big fish back there, and I was catching everything on a wacky rig Senko. I was trying to power fish during pre-fish, and I even tried power fishing. I was throwing crankbaits, spinnerbaits, chatterbaits. Nothing was. I couldn't get a bite on any of them, but I just started throwing that wacky rig against the cypress trees, like the bigger cypress trees, and really just letting it soak. There she is.
Yeah, that's a 23 is worth talking about.
Yeah,
and
so
great fish.
That Senko pretty much soaked there. Like I tried popping it, I tried dragging it, tried a bunch of different stuff, but really it was just really getting it to the right spot and they'd either get it on the first fall, or they'd pick it up after 5 seconds of just kind of dead sticking it there. So,
what color Senko were you throwing? Did color matter at all to you?
I was just about to ask.
It did matter, and the size mattered too, because I was trying to throw a 4-inch Senko, and I don't know if it's just me, but I couldn't skip it. I couldn't throw it. I couldn't get it where I needed it to go. And I don't know, when I did, I don't know if the fall rate wasn't what they wanted, but they weren't eating a 4-inch. It had to be a 5-inch, and it had to be watermelon for me. So I caught my 5 fish pretty early. Like I got a really solid limit pretty early in the morning, and pretty much right at the same time, I ran out of those Senkos. So I'm like, you know what? There was no one there, even during pre-fish, even it was a protected little pocket out of the wind, and no one was there. Like a couple of bass boats went through during pre-fish, and they just like power fished through, a bait on kind of the key trees along the little ditch area, and then got right out of there. And I kind of picked the place apart and really, I knew there was fish there, or I believed there to be fish there, and they bit if you let it sit there for long enough. But yeah, I ran out of Senkos. I'm like, you know what? It's a good time to get out of this spot. I checked out some other areas in that creek. Couldn't find anything. I caught like I think a 17 3/4, but it wasn't an upgrade for me at that time. And by 1 o'clock, I got off the water because I'm like, I gotta go buy a bunch more watermelon Senkos. Like if anyone else is on the same bite, I don't want the bait shack to be sold out. So I'm like, you know what? I'll just get off the water. I'll get 4 or 5 packs of those and hit it up day 2.
Heck yeah. Well, it's been a good day when you burned through that bag or multiple bags of baits, and you gotta I gotta make this tackle trip at the end of the day. That's a great feeling. Well, when they're biting, when you're losing them all, it's kind of shitty. But so just to go over a recap of how day 1 went for you guys, let me scroll up here to the top. Day 1, Nathan, you came out with 98 3/4 with that huge 23 to anchor that. Russ, you were right behind him, 1/4 inch down, with 5 great fish, 1 over the 20 mark, and you had 4 19 pluses. You were right there. And Cody had 3 over the 20 mark and had 2 that I know you wish you could have just got rid of to just gap them a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into day 2 a little bit. Things did change. Yes, sir.
Jimmy, before we start, can I ask Russ a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what was it about your spot that had the fish stacked up so much? Because I wasn't on like a quantity.
I can answer this. He sold his soul to Satan. That's why.
It wasn't a spot. It was a pattern that was consistent all over that north end of the lake, or the west end of the lake, upriver. Me, Adam, and Cody it was all the same type of deal. There was certain areas that had higher concentrations, and sometimes the area I fished on the second day didn't have near as many fish, but the average size was definitely better. But the pattern was consistent all over. It's just some areas had a lot of fish, and those areas they'd technically be a little smaller, and some areas there was less fish, but you can get into some bigger ones is what I found.
I think part of it too is usually when that many fish, because that whole area north is such a traditional spawning area for that lake, and then it rose 2.5 feet, and it definitely scattered out. And usually when they scatter out or in new areas, like you're the first person that ever showed a bait to them in that area. So it's like
they were super aggressive. If you got it in front of them, you felt like you would catch them. And that was what was so hard about going through an area. Like anytime me or Cody or Adam, we all had the feeling like if you go through that same area that you catch fish a second time, it was very hard to get bit because it felt like if they were there, you caught them, and as soon as you did catch them, it thinned out quick.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish I didn't catch as many pre-fishing, but it's too much fun.
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, as said, going into day 2, we saw some differences. We saw the numbers, I don't want to say fall off for some. You guys did stay consistent, but you saw some numbers greatly increase from a few other anglers. I won't go into y'all's numbers yet, but just to give everybody an idea of how the fishing went for a couple of guys. I'll probably pronounce this wrong, but Tangvei, 108 inches on day 2. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And Vinny Fieri, shout out to my man, 105 and a quarter. I mean, I would not care at all if I went away from that tournament without the win. 108 and 105 day, that big over the century mark. Who cares?
They got
But,
him. And I won't tell exactly the spot. I know where they got him, but they were fishing an area that it wouldn't even have crossed my mind to I actually saw somebody pre-fishing. I'm like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. They were throwing, I don't know if it was one of them. Obviously, there was something to it, but they were throwing a deep diving crankbait. I know that.
Yeah. Well, 105 and 108 inches later, you might be like, well, shit.
It really shocked me. I was like, wow, that was totally off my radar. But,
well, let's get right into day 2, Cody. Were y'all, as Russ mentioned, he was starting to see the falling and the clearing of the water. Is that more the same that y'all were experiencing on day 2, which may, for some of y'all, have caused or made that bite just a little bit lesser than day 1?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think it definitely pushed some fish to other areas, though.
Mm-hmm.
For one, like I was able to find shallower water easier, which I'm sure fish even left there, but still, just being able to fish that shallower water made it feel like you caught them when you fished it,
Right.
And I'm convinced too that even when that water did fall out, those fish that were spawning, they did stay up there, because I'm pretty confident of that. So I mean, if you had fish that were on some of those spawning trees, they were definitely still there even after that water fell out. Didn't catch one fish in my main area the second day. I think I caught like one 12-incher. It was crazy. And I really only caught one or two early at all. It was dead slick kind of in the woods where I was at. And then I pretty much threw a Cinco most of the day that second day. And that's kind of one of the things that really made me believe they were spawning was if I had got a bite on a tree, didn't even have to have caught it, but if I had got a bite there, I caught one there that second day. And they seemed like they were a little better ones too. Like I wasn't getting as many bites, but like the average was better.
More quality.
Minus catching those 20s and stuff. I felt like.
Heck yeah. So just before we move on,
I think I lost you for a second. But yeah, no, it was pretty. And then still kind of much like the first day, pretty well got saved by the last like hour and a half or 2 hours. I actually had some kayak. I kind of had some kayak issues, so I was drifting around there for the last little while. But yeah, I think it was like 1 to 2 o'clock. I caught 3 of the 5 fish I used, and kind of pulled into a different area. It was a place I hadn't been, the whole week really. So it was, yeah, it kind of just goes to show like, I mean, covering that water was definitely pretty beneficial.
And how do you, when you're thinking about falling water and everybody talks about how much the bite is better typically on rising water, how do you approach a falling, like when you left day 1, you knew what was going on. Did you do anything different, or did you just strictly focus on areas that you had got bit? Oh, we lost him. What about you, Russ? Same question.
Yeah, I can go into my second day, and that plays a big part of what happened on
Yeah.
my second day. Actually, is so I fished new water. It was a similar type area, but just a little farther upriver, maybe 2-3 miles, about 2 miles above. And I knew if it didn't pan out, I can have a little half-hour paddle down to my other spot. But I got up there, and when I entered into the backwater area, it was still pretty stained, and I've seen some activity on the graph on the fish finder, and my first fish was on the gilly. I knew the spinnerbait wasn't happening. It was too cold. So I started using that ghillie. I'd cast it past the tree. I'd reel it up to the tree. I'd do pop, pop, and then just let it sit. And it was painfully slow. Like I had to wait. I really tried to focus on like the really high percentage trees, because just to like do that on any old tree is just going to waste too much time. So it was tough to do that, but I got one fish doing that. Then I decided to tie on a square bill, 2.5 square bill. It's like black and yellow, a little hand painted one that I made, and got that big 21 3/4 on that. I'm like, all right, good. I found a bait. This is awesome. And as I started working back into that backwater, the water started getting clearer and clearer. The sky started getting higher, and I was like, this crankbait's not working. So then I had to go back to the ghillie. I went back to a Senko, hooked another good one on a ghillie, like an 18-incher. I got my third fish on a ghillie, and then the fourth bite I got, the thing was probably 18, 19-incher. It ran underneath my kayak and got caught up on the transducer and came off. I was like, no, but kept working back. That water just kept getting clearer and clearer, and there was a lot of grass mats there. And I was punching both days a little bit and pre-fish. I spent a lot of time pre-fishing, punching, but just wasn't the right conditions for it. But I felt like this day was on, especially after that cold front, and it was still cold. And I'm like, and the water's clear, and I'm like, they got to be some fish underneath these grass mats. Yeah. So I stuck with it, and eventually I'm like, I got to get back out to the dirtier water. It's just too clean in here. I started working my way back out, hit some stained water, and got a few bites punching. I lost 2 20s in a row. The second one, I lifted it into the kayak. It came off as I lifted it in, bounced in the kayak, bounced out the other side. So I had some missed opportunities, but I tried not to get discouraged. Finally caught a couple more punching. And then I noticed that this whole area I was in was just like a little bit deeper. It was a ditch. There was a bunch of trees there, but there was a bit of a ditch. Because as I continued to go, it got, I was in like 3-4 feet of water, and then all of a sudden it came back up to like a foot of water, and I stopped catching fish, and I'm like, all right, they're in this ditch. So right about then the wind started kicking up pretty good. It'd been blowing actually for about an hour or two, but it was still a little cool. But finally that temperature got right at about like 1:30. I tied on that spinnerbait and got I got a 21 1/4 on the spinnerbait. That just absolutely freight trained it, and it ran right at me, and I couldn't stand up in time. Actually, it snapped my rod in half, because I feel, in a kayak, if it runs underneath your boat, it's hard to get that rod. Unless you're standing up, it's hard to get that rod at an angle. I've broken, it's not the rod's fault at all. Any rod would have broke, but just when I had it kind of high up, and the thing ran right underneath the boat, broke right at the first guide, and the thing's thrashing around underneath my kayak on the backside. I had to hand line it in, got it in, and just kept sticking with it. And with literally 1 minute to go, I knew I was 3 inches, or about 2.5 inches behind Nate. And with 1 minute to go, I got an 18.5-incher that called me 3 inches. And I knew from what he had when the leaderboard was turned off, I knew I was going to be 1/2 inch ahead of him. But I'm like, man, the bite's good right now. Like, it's a good chance probably too. But yeah, that's how my day went. And the whole time, I was paddling this tournament the whole entire time. I was using my Wilderness Systems Attack 120. I had the Torpedo on there when I was pre-fishing, which was awesome, covering a lot of water. But even when I had the Torpedo off and I was just paddling, when I put the rudder on there, it was actually almost, I wouldn't say it was better. You couldn't cover as much water, but as long as you were in that pretty protected water, it was actually really nice, because all the grass mats just like slid right over the top of everything. And I was just like a little bit stealthier.
Oh yeah.
I've been using that kayak for 5 years, and that thing is bulletproof. I've run in all sorts of cypress trees, bang it into everything, and it has never, ever left me stranded or created a problem for me in one tournament ever. So I know I'm sponsored by him now, but I've been using that kayak long before I was sponsored by him, and I freaking love that thing.
You've been with them since I've known you, and Adam was in a bona fide when I met him, And between you two guys, you can attest to how tough a kayak is, because I have watched Adam skin the bottom off of a Bonafide and hook one, like basically just melt it back together for him to keep using. So, but you two guys can. So if you hear Russ or Adam say a boat can take a whipping,
Oh yeah,
believe them on that.
the Bonafides are good. That Bonafide is very similar to the wilderness systems. That's just the style of fishing I do. That's the type of kayak that I really like using.
Heck yeah. Well, Nate, let's hear about your day 2 that sealed the deal for you.
Yeah, day 2. I had a tough time sleeping, thinking about how many times Russ had called. I'm like, he's clearly on a lot of fish, and I feel like I have 5 bites. So, if that. So I had a tough time sleeping, but I thought I'd just go right back to where I was before. Actually, the wind had changed just a little bit, and it was a little bit windier, like kind of hitting that secondary point. I stopped there and I tied on the exact same thing, like a 2.5 inch square bill, black and yellow.
Oh, cool.
I fished that on the secondary point on like exact same thing, high percentage trees right on the corners. There was kind of a little ditch going into my back pool with, larger cypress trees, and I threw that crankbait for a while, and I got a couple bites, but I couldn't hook in anything. Got that Senko back in my hand, and it didn't leave my hand for the rest of the day. I started throwing at those exact same trees, just kind of like picking them apart with the 360, just kind of moving all around them, and I started getting bites again around the same time, and kind of limited out around the same time on day 2. The bite, it got really slow, and I probably should have left that area like hours before, but for some reason I still had faith that I was gonna maybe catch some more, but I upgraded, I think, a couple times, like a couple inch upgrade, but didn't get anything for hours. And I started looking at the leaderboard, and
That's a dangerous thing to do, man.
yeah. And I realized like Russ was nowhere when I checked, and I limited out. That's when I first checked the leaderboard, and I didn't see Russ anywhere. I'm like, whew, thank goodness. I got nothing to worry about here. And then when I checked it close to the end of the day, all of a sudden he's 3 inches behind me, and I'm like, no, I don't trust him not to catch any more fish. So, and I wasn't getting bit, and I had a half an hour to fish. I'm like, I'm getting out of this creek arm, and I went around the outside edge of it, fished down some of those mats, and kept throwing that Senko right on small points, and I got bit, and I upgraded an inch at, I think it was like 242.
That's awesome.
And I'm not sure if the leaderboard caught it or not. I'm not sure what time it turned off.
It turned off at like 2. I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was before that, because I was trying to keep up with it, and I remember I think it was like 1:30 or so, but I clicked on it and I couldn't keep up, and I was like, damn it.
Yeah. So I thought I was 4 inches ahead, and I'm like, okay, that could be okay. He'd have to maybe call a couple more fish with not a lot of time left, and kind of put the odds in my favor, I thought, but I still wasn't very confident getting off the water. And then during the awards ceremony there, he started reading out the. Actually, did he say that you called 3 inches or something?
I did, like a minute before, or they lasted like 30 seconds before they were gonna determine who it was, me and you.
Yeah.
I'm like, so did you call any? Because I made a call.
Right.
That put me half inch ahead of you, and he's like, yeah, I called too, 1 inch. I'm like, oh man, you got it.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I didn't know at what point it picked up my 1 inch, or like if it was on the leaderboard or if it didn't. I wasn't really looking at that point. And then when you said you upgraded 3 inches, I'm like, oh, I think I just lost. It
was a good battle. I definitely
man.
Don't mind losing to a good guy like you, Nate, and it was it's fun when it comes down to the wire like that. I enjoy it.
It was amazing.
So we'll hit it real quick. So the day 2, Nate ended up with third with 95 3/4. Russ was not too far behind him with fifth place, 95.5 after day 2. And Cody was eighth with 91 1/4. So he was still in the mix. And then going into the totals, just for anybody that maybe hadn't heard about. So Nate ended up with 94.5, as y'all have heard from them talking. Russ was right on his tail with 194, so in half an inch, and they battled it out all the way to the end. And Cody came in with 188.5. So they put a little bit of a gap on you, but I will say this, that when I was watching the leaderboard through the day as I could, I felt like when I saw that Cody got third, I was like, well, damn, where'd that come from? Not that you didn't have a good day. It's just like I knew where you were after day 1, but you saw like the 108 and the 105, and you're like, oh, well, that's going to put some of these guys down, towards 10th. And then just like boom, there you were. So, but I appreciate y'all coming on so much. It was a great event. Y'all given great information on changing conditions and how y'all attacked such a great lake with great fish. But let's hit some conclusions real quick. Cody, how do you feel about how everything was and where you ended up?
I was thrilled with it. I mean, kind of even after the first couple days of practice, like I had it was a good couple days, but that wind just kind of threw a wrench in it. And when Russ and I went and practiced on Friday, like I don't think I caught a fish over probably 19 1/4, and I don't know. Russ might have caught one around that.
No, I was like 18 probably for me. We were getting a lot, but no big
lot
ones.
of fish, but didn't really catch big ones. And like I predicted that the record was going to get broken in this tournament all week long, and because they were slamming out there, and I felt like was still going to stick it out, and get it. So I kind of felt like
we were both guessing that there on the first day. I was like, there's going to be 5 limits over 100 inches. We were both kind of but
yeah. That wind definitely protected those numbers a little bit. I think more than just the 1 day record would have fallen had it have been sub 20 miles out there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. What about you, Russ? Any conclusions on this? How it went? Anything you would have changed, or happy with how you ended it up? I mean, we know you wanted to win.
I'm definitely happy with how it went. I missed a few opportunities losing some big fish the second day, but that's just how it was. The first day I got really fortunate. I didn't lose like a single fish, I don't think. Maybe a couple little ones. It didn't matter, but nothing even. But yeah, like I said, overall, I was, I had time just on the drive home. I always kind of reflect back on the tournament. It's like, okay, should I have done anything different, or could I, just kind of reflect back on everything. And I really felt good about just everything from the decision for me, Cody, and Adam to go camp out together. It seems whenever I go camping, we always always a good tournament. Yeah, so I'm trying to camp out. Yeah, so that was cool, and we just really kept to ourselves, just the 3 of us, and didn't really talk to too many outside people. Tried to kind of stay away from people at the ramp as best I could, and just kind of keep to ourselves and try to dial it in, not listen to a lot of dog talk. And yeah, I felt like my game plan worked out. The weather forecast stayed consistent with what they said it was going to be early in the week. And that's always nice. The worst yeah, as you see a forecast for the weekend, you get there Tuesday and you start your pre-fishing based on that forecast. And next thing you know, like it's completely different. It's nothing like they said it was going to be, but the forecast was very accurate all from when we got there earlier in the week. The one thing is we didn't get quite as much rain. Like it seems like that big storm that came through, it's like Wednesday or Thursday, something like that, just kind of missed us to the north and south. We had a little bit of rain, but we really missed like the brunt of it. And looking back, it would actually been nicer if we got a little bit more rain. I think the fish would have been maybe a little bit better, but then, you ask for too much and then everything's blown out. So, but yeah, I was happy with the area. I'm happy that pattern, even though it was, I did caught a lot of fish on Saturday. Sunday was tough. I really had to grind, and those areas where I actually caught those fish in the last couple hours was I moved back out of the pocket out towards the main lake more in an area where I never got bit free fishing. So they're completely moved. But yeah, I'm happy I made that adjustment. I'm happy that I, with so much on the line that last couple hours, had the guts to kind of fish some new water and just say, okay, this is where they should be going, even though I didn't get bit here. And sure enough, that's where they were. So I was really happy with how it went.
No, you can't ask for better, man. I mean, you can, but as a humble a person as you guys are, I think you're right. Well, what about you, Nate? Any conclusions? A comment that I saw that stuck out to me was somebody commented and said that you made Canadian history. Run down first Hobie event, first time fishing that in the U.S., and you smoked it. So, would you have changed anything? I highly doubt it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Like, I felt like I made pretty smart decisions out there, and like I stayed patient, which is something I have a tough time with, but it worked out really well. I made good decisions. I moved when I had to move. I could have maybe done some things a little earlier, but I'm pretty happy with it. It would have been a little more exciting if I would have got to power fish like I planned. I'm loading up on chatterbaits and spinnerbaits and all these moving baits, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And
Cinco.
That just wasn't the bite for me. So it was just throwing Senkos and kind of finesse fishing like I do up here in Ontario. So no, I'm pretty happy.
Man. I mean,
Can't wait to get back down there.
$10,500 happy.
Yeah.
Tournament of Champions qualified happy. Yeah. I think it was a good trip, man. The drive still sucked, but I mean, look at what you won. You paid for like 3 tanks of gas, so good job. Well, all right, guys. It's been a great show. I thank you guys so much for coming on. Fantastic to get to talk to everybody again. Nate, great to have you on. Never having you on before. Russ and Cody, so glad you could join me again. This is the part of the show where I like to give you guys a chance to shout out everybody that makes fishing easier for you. So, Cody, take it away. Who makes it easier for you?
And Fish USA definitely, helped me for several years now, as far as having a bunch of different kayak companies. Hobie, they've got pretty much all of them. Tackle, got some of my favorite lines like Gamma, Dakota Lithium. I think I've been with them for almost, a little over 2 years. And Newport Vessels is kind of a new one for me this year, which pairs perfectly with those 260 amp hour 12 volt Dakota Lithiums. I run the 24 volt a lot too, but I actually didn't charge it after Friday, and we ran a long ways, and I just probably ran it like 8 miles on Caddo today. So I've probably got like over 16 miles out of that 24 volt with the or NK 180, but it's on the charger now. So we're ready for another
battle.
Yeah, they're built so strong, man. I think I've had this is my 4th different motor I've had in over 6 years, and I've never made it through 1 year on the same motor. And I did last year, so that's impressive for me. I don't know how much longer it's got in, but it's definitely still kicking. Catch Products definitely make some really cool videos and have some really good boards, that we all pretty much all use now. And Dobbins rods, that was a kind of one I kind of switched to last year. Man, awesome rods. They really are good. Some of the best like composite and CB glass rods I've ever used. Really like them, but all of those companies have helped me, tremendously the last little while. But thanks for having us on, Jimmy. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad you made it. You were a little late, but it's okay. I forgive you. All right, what about you, Russ?
Yeah, I'd like to start off, thinking Wilderness Systems kayaks. Like I say, I absolutely love my Attack 120. It's perfect for that style of fishing. I also have a Recon that I've had for a little while, and I'm just waiting, supply chain issues and stuff like that. And I really want to, when I set it up, I really want to just do it right the first time and get everything I need. But I'm looking forward to setting up the live scope and do some of that style of fishing too, for when I fish offshore or any of that deeper water. I've got some tournaments where that's going to come into play. Torpedo, I have the Torpedo 1103 rigged on that, and it was just awesome for covering so much water. I could run 7 miles an hour in my Attack on that thing, and that foot steering and zipping in and out of all those cypress trees. And Cody's seen me do it. I can make such tight turns and I can maneuver really well with that 1103 on the back of the Attack. Also, thank Dakota Lithium. We were camping out there, and I've said it many times, but I have the 200 amp hours in my truck, and it's a system that allows me to charge my Torqeedo batteries, my fish finder batteries, which are also also Dakota lithium. I have a couple of power boxes that I've been running my Tacticams and my GoPros this year. So I got some great video footage from this tournament. Yeah, I'd like to thank iRod. My new Signature Series rod came out. I'm just really grateful that they gave me that opportunity to create and design that rod. It's called the Snyders Sniper. It's a 7'5". That's a very, very versatile rod. It's like in between a medium and a medium heavy, in between like a moderate and a moderate fast rod. And I think it's the best rod for fishing a chatterbait, especially if you're making long casts. Maybe not for skipping under docks and stuff like that, but if you're making long casts with a chatterbait, like on flats with grass, I'm telling you, you can't beat it. It's a great rod. Another great rod was the Square Bill Special and the Lone Star Special, which are both 6'9" rods, which worked really well for just working through those cypress trees and those tight quarters. I was throwing that Square Bill on the Square Bill Special and the Lone Star Special. I was using with the swim jig and pitching around some baits as well. Also, like thank Catch Outdoors. I'm going to be shooting a video here with Dusty and Cody and Lance coming up in a few weeks. I'm really excited about that. And obviously, they're the go-to board for all the tournaments right now. I think that's it.
Well, guys, I appreciate it. And, I'm going to let y'all get to it. I know y'all got a lot going on. Cody's getting ready for another tournament. Russ is trying to get settled back in. We lost Nate before he had to get his, thank whoever helps him make it easier. But I appreciate you guys again. And I'm sure we'll have y'all again. And, congrats and good luck for the rest of the year. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks for having us on, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
I enjoyed it.
Y'all be safe. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, guys. Well, I thank y'all so much, and I think I'm about to get some shut-eye, get ready for some pre-fishing down here at Del Hollow, and we will holler at you next week. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode here on Paddle and Fin. Be sure to drop a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or smash that subscribe button on any platform you're listening in on. Be sure to check us out on Waypoint TV, waypointtv.com. Make sure you sign up for the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League at paddleandfin.com/fantasy. You could support this show through Patreon, patreon.com/paddleandfin. Don't forget to check out the website, paddleandfin.com. Catch us on YouTube. If you got a question, comment, or want to see a future guest on the show, be sure to email us at paddleandfin@gmail.com. Shout out to our show supporters, Yak Gadget. You can check out all the fine kayak accessories at yakgadget.com. Pelican Professional. For all your cases, coolers, and lighting needs, go to pelican.com. Rocktown Adventures. Your Midwest premier paddle sports destination. Go to rocktownadventures.com. Eastport Marina, the beautiful destination on Dale Hollow Lake. If you're looking for lodging, kayaks, kayak accessories, or anything fishing related on the beautiful Dale Hollow Lake, go to eastport.info. And Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and fill your tackle boxes today.